JoAnne, what is it that you would like to see Lip-Bu Tan manage to navigate today? Is it better that he promises more investment into the US, more manufacturing, and that he has extricated himself from China? Or ultimately, does he even need to stand down in some way as CEO?
Yeah, it's really unclear, Caroline. Obviously, I think he can defend himself from the concerns that he's conflicted, and that's his main mission today. I don't know if that means he needs to do more to separate from his prior work and investments. I don't know how much capacity he has to do that. I think Ian is right that the administration wants to be able to continue to push the narrative that they are doing something to bring more chip manufacturing back to the U.S. And so his announcements of less investment or delayed investment, is a concern to the administration, but they don't have the customers yet. Maybe he can say, hey, we've got these guys on the line, we're reeling them in. Maybe that would be reassuring. But ultimately, Intel needs to keep those subsidies, but not at the cost of having to spend so much CapEx in the near term when they don't have customers. So a very fine line for the CEO to walk here.
The stock's up 6%, so the market likes something about the idea that Lip-Bu Tan's going to go to DC and meet with the president. Present day, you're a fund manager looking all across tech, but you had a long career in semiconductors. Lip-Bu Tan also has had a very long career in semiconductors. A lot of this affiliation with China or indirect affiliation has been well known. Were you aware of it? Do you understand his history?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know him that well, but I think the public information about his prior work is pretty clear. He's obviously very highly respected. He was brought in by the board to take Intel in a different direction, one that is more measured, less capital spending forward than Pat Gelsinger wanted to do. And so it's just worrisome, right, that he might, have to be removed because of concerns that really aren't, well-founded. So he seems like he's a very good person to run Intel at this point, and Intel desperately needs the help. They need to take that company in a different, more streamlined, more efficient direction while they sort out the recipe for designing and manufacturing chips, which was a huge stumbling block for them. And that's why they're in the position they are, right? Why AMD has taken so much share from Intel over the years in server chips and elsewhere. So, this is a company we would avoid. We are avoiding at this point. We don't think it's a good place for investor money. There are just way too many uncertainties about the potential of Intel to make a comeback.
Meanwhile, the uncertainties loom large about access to China and what you have to pay to do that from an AMD and an NVIDIA, but an uncertainty you're willing to swallow if the underlying tailwinds are still so strong. Make of it what you will. Tell us what you thought about the AMD and NVIDIA deals.
Yeah, so clearly, right, the companies are better off with access to China than without, even with the 15% export tax. The potential revenue at risk, $30-ish billion for Intel, $6 to $10 billion for AMD, likely to potentially grow over time. So to pay 15% on that, it's going to cut into their margins to some degree. They probably get a 50%, 60% gross margin on those sales. I think that they're going to have to swallow this, right? They're charging what the market will bear right now for those chips, selling into China and elsewhere. I don't think they'll be able to pass on this tariff or this export tax to the Chinese customers. They're charging them as much as they can get away with already. So, it's definitely going to be a hit to margins on what is a minority part of their businesses. But it's better to have access than not. And I think the stocks are up because maybe this resolves the uncertainty. Maybe people will say, okay, they're going to have to pay this, but hey, now we can rely on the fact that they'll have these export licenses. Whereas before it was this sort of vague national security concern. No, you can't sell chips to China. Now that's gone away, right? It's clearly not a national security issue if the government is willing to let them pay a fee to gain that access.
AMD put a statement out this morning saying they have an initial export license. They didn't address the 15% revenue split. NVIDIA put out a statement saying they've not yet shipped any H20s to China for months, but they hope to. Can you and your desk analysts start modeling for some real China revenues in the near term from both those companies?
Yeah, I think, well, from what we know, yes. I mean, it's good that AMD has confirmed they have the licenses. So I think we would definitely model in that 15% hit to revenue. And it's unclear, by the way, where this goes legally, right? It's unconstitutional to impose an export tax like this, but it's not clear who would have the legal standing to object to the tax. And clearly, NVIDIA and AMD aren't going to, because they don't want to unbalance the apple cart here and risk those export licenses. But perhaps one of the business associations does. It's just unclear whether this shouldn't stand. But we're seeing more and more of these kinds of pay-to-play arrangements by the U.S. government that could increasingly, put a tax on businesses. And it should be known, this is an ex post tax, right? This has happened after the fact of the companies having designed these chips and begun to sell them, and they want to sell more. What we worry about is that now companies are going to take this potentially into account. Do I want to develop the next chip, or do I want to develop the next, whatever medical device, if I'm going to be subject to a 15% revenue tax?